Persona is a series of games that I love dearly. I love them so much, in fact, that I've only played Persona 5. Okay, listen. I haven't gotten to the other games yet, but that's besides the point. You see, ever since Persona 5 burrowed its way into my brain like the friendliest parasite imaginable, I've been invested in the franchise as a whole to the highest extent that my personal schedule allows. This game hit me in a way that no other really has, and it holds a very sacred place in my heart. As a series, Persona has always managed to make players care about its characters and events to varying effect, as well as granting us compelling gameplay to varying effect. The 5th game in particular manages to hone in on perfecting the smallest of details and enriching the world with a dose of liveliness. Persona 5 feels as real as a game with a penis chariot can manage. You can't simply summarize the game by saying, it's fun. It holds artistic value that stretches beyond the basics and entices those who sink into the hours. However, even the best games have flaws worth critiquing, moments that irk us the wrong way and make us go, ugh, what happened? Nobody is perfect, especially when developing a massive game. So, in the spirit of our presumably shared love for this RPG, let's discuss the worst hiccup in this game and tear it to shreds. Here's your warning for spoilers, of course. The game has many palaces of ranging quality and scale, but a clear low point is the 5th palace, that of Kunikazu Okumura. You may be wondering though, what makes this palace so much worse than the rest? The story? The format and gameplay in the metaverse? The music? The underutilization of a fluffy gardener?
Yep.
Okay, obviously I'm going to clarify, but somehow this entire section of the game manages to borrow every aspect that worked well in prior palaces, yet twist these elements in the purest form of drudgery and tedium imaginable. Their own design philosophy practically stabs them in the back when laziness kicks in, and you can really feel that knife twisting here. I mean, when a game with this much dialogue has me actively groaning through an entire in-game week of cutscene bickering, perhaps that's a sign of misfortune. So, again, why is it that this specific section of the game feels so underwhelming and endless? It's almost like a McDonald's burger. It has the right ingredients and ideas, and it looks like an often delicious product on the surface. But you bite into it and realize that it's both lacking in flavor and won't satisfy your hunger. Also, if you leave it in a jar for a year, it won't decompose and is most certainly responsible for the obesity epidemic in America. Am I still talking about Persona here? Probably not. Back on track, I'll be tackling this one thing at a time, so let's start with riding off an emotionally intense session of Beach Day with Hacker Man and a relaxing trip to Hawaii where we totally didn't miss our principal taking the roadkill approach to life, we're immediately dropped into some serious and definitely not petty drama. The Phantom Thieves have gained popularity with the global public now. The fan site is booming with requests for people they should pursue, yet doubt is bubbling regarding the repercussions of their actions. Meanwhile, due to an offhand comment from Ryuji, Morgana is dealing with a deep inferiority complex. This is a great setup for more interesting plot scenarios and explorations of the game's themes. Morgana's character arc is especially interesting in concept, as plenty of capable members have joined since and have virtually overtaken his initial role as a mentor. One can only wonder how they'll handle this. Oh my goodness! Following the assertion to tackle the next known palace owner, our highly requested target being Big Bang Burger's CEO, Mr. Okumura, the team is split on whether they should hesitate on acting and let things calm down, or if they should rush into the fray and take down the Cretan. Just to clarify, they've never met this man and only found out he owned a palace through a metaverse search. So discussion begins. Morgana and Ryuji both agree to jump headfirst into this madness, yet Yusuke and An are apprehensive. Ryuji tells An that he disagrees with her counterpoint, which, as a simple reminder, is the exact same motion that Morgana is supporting. Yet, suddenly, Morgana stands up and shouts,
"Ryuji, you douchebag! You are conceited and are only using the Phantom Thieves title to pick up chicks."
Oh. Now, not even considering how blatantly wrong the latter half of that statement is, if you even remotely understand Ryuji as a character, the hypocrisy of Morgana claiming the dude is doing this solely for selfish gain is agonizing. Mr. Notcat is the one who keeps insisting that he's only helping the Phantom Thieves to become human again, and even if we know that this explanation of his isn't inherently true, he keeps pushing that narrative of self-interest. Yet, by some Herculean leap in logic, Ryuji is labeled as the selfish one? The runt is even called out by Ryuji here, yet the tone of the scene doesn't seem to side with him. I wouldn't go as far as to say it supports Morgana, but Ryuji's argument isn't given credit in the slightest. Okay, we're already off to a bad start, but things can take a turn for the better. You know, as long as the story is self-aware and doesn't drag this out, and yeah, you already know where this is headed. Get this, Morgana just up and leaves the Phantom Thieves and claims he's gonna take down Okumura on his own. Why? Because a few weeks prior, Ryuji called him less useful than someone else. Yes, really, Ryuji said the N-word. Ryuji said he was less useful than someone. This sudden strike of apparent PTSD sends Morgana away, and everyone seems to be blaming Ryuji for this argument, barring your own character's mild questioning of Morgana's abrupt departure. I could go off on this eternally, but let's ignore the stupidity of the setup for now and carry on. Morgana flees to the street so he can solo the palace like the speedrunner he is. Meanwhile, Haru, our oncoming ally, sees a cat cross the street and follows it? Oddly enough, this is the most sensible part of the story arc, trust me. I'll believe one fluffball chasing another fluffball any day. Morgana soon enters the palace off screen. You see, we've already been told that he can enter the metaverse without the use of the metanav. Makes sense, but they never really established how, so I sort of find it odd that he enters the palace and somehow Haru joins him inside. Does him entering just create a distortion field in the nearby vicinity? And even then, she had to be either decently far or dead silent as she trailed him, considering it's the dead of night and he somehow had no clue that she had entered with him. Well, at least not until getting brutally beaten down. Feels like a stretch, but maybe I just need to suspend my disbelief and consider that Haru is just a ninja. In the meantime, the thieves are sad that their cat ran away, resulting in the player no longer being allowed to actually play the game until the squabble between Ryuji and Morgana is resolved. I know I implied we wouldn't delve into gameplay gripes until a little later, but this is a bit too aggravating to set aside. This arc is the most ham-fisted part of the story, and it's one of the very few that essentially strips away any chance of taking a breather from the plot. Usually that's not too awful, yet by now the current plot is likely eroding at your patience like a pebble in Vietnam. Maybe my critical eye would lower to a more serene attitude if I could, you know, take a break to hang out with a politician I met on the street.
As your average high schooler does.
But instead, you're locked into a repeated slog of mourning at home for your pet to return. I get that Morgana shows up in a good portion of those Shibuya scenes, so it saves time if they avoid designing new scenes for an ultimately minuscule sequence, but this is already a game that goes above and beyond when it comes to small details that are ultimately unnecessary, yet add that little bit of immersion and artistic value. I can't help but feel just a teensy bit off that this is one of the few sections where they avoided subtle changes that would enhance the pacing of the game to a surprising degree. I don't know, maybe they believed you'd be too enthralled by the story to give a crap. Heading off my tangent and going back to the plot, actually, no. I'd rather avoid calling this plot. You know what this is? It's drama. You don't go to the playground and see two of your friends argue about the best Power Ranger and go, yeah, this is going in my autobiography. It's just bickering, and it'll be resolved before you've even convinced yourself that it's worth caring about. Anyways, the team goes into the palace to search for Morgana after a day or two of worrying. They figure out that the palace distortion is outer space, which, okay, I get how Futaba considered that as an answer, but that distortion makes little to no sense contextually. Why is it outer space? Because Big Bang Burger is themed after outer space? All the other palaces are based on characteristics of the owners and their perspectives of the world, yet this hardly matches any logical destination. Kamoshida had a castle that represented his prevailing reign over the school. Madarame had a museum that described his own vanity regarding the art he forced his pupils to push out, considering himself a genius of the modern era. Okumura? He's got outer space. Why? Because space burgers. I get that he has this goal to ascend to the political world, hence building a rocket to fly up to space. That's fine, but that strangely feels like a goal wholly detached from his corporate abuse. Maybe there's some super deep symbolism to it being outer space beyond that, rather than what would make more sense, that being a factory, but I could be wrong here. However, considering how they handle Okumura's character from here, I have solid reasons to doubt that. The group then enters the palace, in broad daylight, in front of the office building for a multi-million-dollar organization. Who wrote this scene? Who wrote this palace? This couldn't be the same people, right? Please tell me I'm right here. This only adds so many more questions to my already flustered mind. How did nobody see them enter the metaverse other than Akechi? What was caught on Akechi's recording of them entering? Did they vanish into thin air?
What does that prove? That can be easily hoaxed as a video.
And even then, why wasn't he dragged into the palace with them? Or was he? Why wasn't anyone else pulled into the palace? Or were they? This isn't making my understanding of how Haru entered the palace any simpler. Do people in the real world actually see a distortion field when they enter the palace? Is Haru legitimately a ninja? Why can't they just choose to do this at night? Why would any political figure, even one as corrupt as Shido, who actively wants to take down the Phantom Thieves, believe Akechi's David Blaine video?
So, The group enters the palace and are already considered threats. They claim this is because the news coverage has Okumura on guard and he's being extra defensive now. Or maybe it's just an excuse for the writers to avoid writing interesting interactions with the palace owner, since they apparently just didn't care enough when making this entire portion of the game. Whatever, I'll let it slide. At least this time they gave us an excuse that actually makes an inkling of sense. You then proceed through a mostly boring scripted sequence where you walk through a handful of empty corridors in the least visually inspired palace offered by the game. I'll get to that later. You find some bots that are a clear allegory for the harsh working conditions of Okumura's employees, and this is fine for the most part, but you're gonna get exhausted by the sight of these robots real quick. Also, I'm still baffled that this is specifically an outer space palace when it could have just as easily been a factory that you later find out to be in space. Wouldn't that have been a cool twist that would add some interesting stakes to your exploration? Most of the palace takes place with no view of the stars anyhow, so a simple dialogue change would still work even with the current setup. Oh, wait, I just asked for this palace to be interesting. Nah, that's not allowed here. We then proceed with the thieves stumbling across Morgana and Haru, who, I guess knew they were coming? I guess they could predict that, but how long were you guys waiting there? Hours? A day? Haru, don't you have curfew? What if she went home to rest and that was just when the thieves got there? Alright, never mind, doesn't matter. This is genuinely one of the more entertaining sections of the game, and I'm glad that we finally get that fun dialogue kicking back in. Of course, this is all layered over the veil of Morgana being a brat and whining about his self-esteem, so that kind of lessens the fun factor when you think about it. We are introduced to Haru the Beauty Thief, a delicate girl who happens to be the daughter of Okumura himself. After Morgana dragged her into the metaverse, she's been seeking out ways to help fix her father's issues and stop his malicious deeds. She's also engaged to a rapist. Soon we finally meet Kunikazu Okumura himself, and geez, this man has no discernible personality traits, huh? Let's see, he's stern, he's professional, doesn't like the Phantom Thieves. He's a nothing character. Where's my Saturday morning cartoon villains? He's dressed like Vader for a catchy sake. At least give me something substantial with this personality. I miss Toilet Goblin. I miss Mama Bird. I miss MC Cashnet. At least he was the flyest fly to ever fly into... Yeah, this joke is stupid, but you get my point. We arrive finally at a confrontation in the metaverse where Ryuji prepares to apologize to Morgana. Mind you, we haven't been able to actually play the game since this moronic argument started. So, we'll finally be gifted with that sweet release. Right? Right? You see, as your group starts to butter up Morgana, simultaneously abandoning the use of their codenames and apologizing to him profusely, Ryuji said something degrading to him like the dope he is. This results in Morgana turning into a bus and attempting to run over your group several times. Granted, this is because you tried cornering him to actually talk things over, but no rational-minded human would pull something like this. Oh, wait, he's a cat. So Morgana, in his attempts to escape the other thieves, crashes and flips on his side, in the center of an intersection. Alright, sure. Morgana is given another opportunity to come back, but is too prideful to admit he needs the team, ditching them once again. Haru and the stubborn cat leave the metaverse, but the two are confronted by the sudden presence of creepy McSleazebag who tries to force himself onto her. The cat then attempts to interfere and is immediately kicked into a wall where he violently breaks his spine. Then the game ends. The thieves leave as well and find Haru struggling to escape her apparent fiancé, who gets pressured into leaving and declares that he won't forget their faces. This is important to the plot, as they never actually meet him again, at least the real version of him, and this line has essentially no bearing on the plot. Okay, yes, I know this is a small nitpick, but in a story generally consistent with its tight writing and dynamic characters, stuff like this just feels amusing to me. Morgana and Haru are taken to LeBlanc to rest up, and the group has another intervention with the cat, this time without the threat of being flattened. Though Morgana keeps up the facade that he believes they should split up, Haru basically exposes him as a stubborn liar who needs to shut up and hug his friends. Also, Haru rants about her fiancé and explains how she's a quiet little dumpling who, in reality, wants to axe down the gremlin. Finally, after, what has it been, half a week or something, Morgana admits that he's just a massive tsundere who wants to indulge in all the Persona friendship juices. Never let me say that phrase again. The conflict, as well as Morgana's character arc of insecurities, is resolved. I mean, neither Morgana nor Ryuji ever actually apologized to one another as far as I can tell, but that's... No. No! You know what? No! This entire argument started because of these two. I'm not just gonna let the game throw the core of their dispute out the window. Seriously, are you kidding me? I'm not delusional, am I? Ryuji and Morgana never have a real interaction during that whole sequence. I think Ryuji speaks once and just goes home. They spent all this time stressing over this conflict between the two and use it as a lazy plot device that might have been more excusable if it actually led to something at least serviceable. But this? This is like if you tried driving to your nearby McDonald's for a simple meal, but ended up speeding through the drive-thru too fast and crashed into a lake. Even the Persona 5 anime managed to beat out the game here when it came to resolving this plot. When the anime that gave us Akechi Bay and All It Attacks on My Eyes is beating out the game it's based on, you know you screwed up. I think I need to calm down. The Morgana insecurity arc is over. We can move on and let ourselves focus on Haru's arc now. That should be better. There's no way it's worse than this mind-numbing waste of time. Speeding ahead a tad, Haru joins the thieves and is ready to pursue Okumura as a team. Their goal is to steal his treasure before Haru is forced to move in with her fiancé, so there are some stakes in this. As the group meets up to go into the palace once more, Morgana reveals that... Haru only half awakened her persona? That's a thing, I guess? I'd question it more, but the prior plot was so moronic in comparison that I couldn't care less what excuse the game has for this one. At least it gives us one of the coolest awakening sequences in the game. Also, I'm just gonna note how Morgana just spent a week whining about how everyone implied he was useless, yet in this conversation will blatantly call Haru a liability who will slow them down. I'm not saying he's wrong, but it's only backhanding me even more for bothering to sit through the last few days of story. Once heading in, Haru and the gang are confronted by her father, who is dressed like if Mysterio wore a Smurf. Also, Pervert Man is here just standing around and being a pervert. Being fair though, at least Okumura has some semblance of a personality here. Boiling it down just exposes him as being your stereotypical evil man working for selfish gain, but it's a start. At least you feel the scummy nature he harnesses since he essentially tells the creepy fiancé that he can just force himself onto Haru if he so desires. Oh, and then the creep turns into a sexually harassing battlebot. A sexually harassing battlebot. Yeah, what?!
Now, why don't you come to my place?
Nope, get away, I don't want this, no, touch stranger danger, nope, get away, nope! Okay, you know what I said earlier about Haru only half awakening? Yeah, I'm not really upset by it, considering it genuinely does make some sense. She's conflicted on whether or not to stand for herself here, and that gives us an awakening worthy of this game's most critically underappreciated girl. As in, she reveals her persona as a trap but with gun barrels rather than a penis, causing Ryuji to subsequently piss himself. Also, just a small note, I love the line,
"We are the Phantom Thieves, here to take your bride!"
It's great. Let me enjoy this before the game starts pissing me off again. The group beats the fiancé bot and Haru grants herself the nickname Noir for the sake of sneaking an N-word pass into the space station.
It means black.
Here we get to leap ahead quite a bit since nothing drastic happens plot-wise to break up the monotony of this palace. You'd think this is actually a good thing considering the lackluster aura of the current arc, but no. I'll get to that later, but all I'll say is that at least you can skip cutscenes. Eventually the team sends out a calling card for Okumura and they confront him in the palace. Okumura tricks them into thinking he had a change of heart with arguable levels of believability, and he manages to trap all but Haru and Morgana, proclaiming how the only way to succeed in this world is to kick down those below you to reach the highest rung in the social ladder. Haru is given the choice to either abandon her friends and join her father's empire, or to stay with her friends and be left to fail. This is honestly a really good setup to finish Haru's arc. The palace is essentially dedicated to her after all. It's literally the one belonging to her father. Haru can turn around and go to her friends, fighting for her own personal justice, and this palace can be bookended strongly with Haru being left as another memorable party member, right? Well, no. Instead, it turns out that this game hates me with a burning passion. You see, when Haru turns around to support the thieves, Okumura instead looks at Morgana and claims he's seen how the cat can join him instead, since he was fighting the Phantom Thieves earlier and proclaimed that nothing could be gained by working with the group. Also, he inexplicably tries coercing Morgana with the offer of letting him pull the switch for their escape shuttle as if he were an actual baby. Somehow I'd actually agree with Okumura's presumption here. Now, you know how in Madarame's palace, Yusuke had a great monologue condemning the man who made him endure so much pain? Or how Futaba confronted the ghostly visage of her mother with newly found passion and justice in life? It seems like the next logical step would be a speech between Haru and her father. That'd be the smart thing to do. Oh, wait. But this is the Okumura Palace. They don't do the smart thing here. It is, in fact, Morgana who suddenly breaks out into a monologue. He literally speaks for Haru and explains her arc for her, while also wrapping things up in a nice little bow as he completes his character arc. Yeah, when I claimed that Morgana's arc was completed before, I lied. I mean, technically I didn't. That was the logical endpoint for his little dilemma, so you'd think they'd finally give Haru some time to shine, but the selfish troglodyte steals her thunder in the most important moment to solidify her character. You wanna know why Haru isn't as beloved as the other characters in this game? It's not that she joins in so late, because there are still 3 entire dungeons past this point. It's this one moment. We're never given that closure that leaves her as a stable character in our mind. Why? Because this isn't Haru Okumura's story. This is Morgana's story. Haru, meanwhile, is left in the dust like her father prophesied, the other thieves reaping the benefits of our recognition while the story progresses at such a breakneck pace from here on out that she's never given the time to recover beyond some occasional mementos dialogue, and a confidant that is so far into the game that most won't complete it, especially since we've been given almost no incentive to care about Haru to spend the brief time we have on her. I'm pissed, honestly. This is just depressing. So, they, beat the boss, woohoo. Okumura has his heart stolen, his treasure being a toy spaceship because sure, and the plot continues. Now, you may be wondering what happens next. Well, I'll tell ya. Okumura friggin' dies. This isn't a bad thing. I actually love this moment. From this point on, the story reaches a renaissance that piques the player's interest almost immediately and sets up the conflict of the following palace, which is likely the greatest portion of the game by far. No bullcrap bickering between party members, nor story beats cut short, and topped with a villain more worthy of your praise than James Cameron over here. The next palace truly sets a gold standard for this game, as well as the series as a whole. So, if the casino palace is so good, why does this one suck so much? Going back to the inciting incident for this entire scenario, Ryuji and Morgana had a dumb argument, one that literally started for no reason beyond Morgana projecting his own stresses onto a situation that didn't even make sense contextually. Seriously, Ryuji criticizes one thing that An says and doesn't even push that stance beyond one sentence, yet Morgana suddenly starts shouting at and insulting him. Ryuji then points out Morgana's own hypocrisy and the feline can't take it, ditching the group and provoking a spiral of terrible storytelling choices that leave neither us nor the group in-game satisfied. Since the argument feels neither necessary nor impactful, the entire arc feels the same because it was built on that foundation. And no, I'm not saying that characters and stories can't make irrational decisions. Morgana has an inferiority complex hidden behind pride, and flawed characters are often great if given proper development, but the abruptness of this is so forced that it pushes past my suspension of disbelief in ways I didn't even think were possible. Even then, disregarding the fact that Ryuji and Morgana never even have a proper conversation to apologize to one another, I repeat, the two never actually apologize. Morgana's arc is seemingly resolved just before palace exploration begins. Yet, they brought it all back around at the end, shoving Haru out of the spotlight. When you're paying attention to the flow of events with even the slightest semblance of rationality, you'll be quickly struck by how agonizing this mess is. Meanwhile, the casino manages to interweave a menagerie of equally interesting plot lines that are all implemented with a careful usage of tension and entertainment. You're given the most interesting premise for a palace antagonist since Kamoshida's castle, and are looping things back around to a storyline that has already revealed its ending. Yet now you're piecing together the details of this all-encompassing puzzle that fulfills you in more ways than one. It's fun, it's engaging, its beauty is felt in spades, and it feels important. This is how you make art, folks. Buy Persona 5 right now. Do it. If you already bought it, do it again. Just give Atlus your money! At the end of the day, the Okumura Palace just doesn't feel important at all. It feels like filler. Like that plastic McDonald's burger I described earlier, it's a cheap product that looks like the real thing and has all the elements of the real thing, yet few details have any real care put into them, or at least any care that's apparent. It leaves you feeling empty, driven to wit's end by this utter failing on every level. This story arc does not represent the full game. Persona 5 has flaws at times, but the storytelling is generally amazing and engaging to those playing. It's so good that it can motivate even those distasteful of JRPGs to grind it out and experience what this game has to offer. But I can hardly spare any praise when it comes to this specific portion of the game's story. I'm not sure if Okumura's Palace speaks volumes to how great the rest of the game is in this regard, or if the rest of the game just amplifies your understanding of how awful this palace is. And the best part? I've only talked about the story so far. I haven't even explained the gameplay this palace offers yet. Oh my gosh, this video is already so long! Honestly though, story is only part of what you need to make a game work. As long as the gameplay grants a strong enough impression, we can pass this off as nothing but a bump in the road. So, how's the gameplay? Huh. This is gonna be a nightmare, isn't it? Persona has always had an interesting balance of gameplay, the player being tasked with juggling the nebulous state of their social life, alongside the more action-oriented Shadow World exploration. Considering this palace doesn't really affect the social aspect of gameplay to a major degree, I'll be mainly discussing the contents of the palace itself. However, this doesn't mean I'm going to ignore the wrongs committed against social gameplay during this arc. I know I stated this earlier, but it really is inexcusable that we lose the capability to socialize during the entire period of Morgana's absence. You see, P5 is a game that gets you into the mindset of planning your days carefully. You only have so much time after all. You'll be stuck on decisions of whether or not you risk hanging out with the sketchy back alley doctor instead of calling up your teacher through the maid hotline. Jeez, Joker is one weird kid. You're always carefully considering how each day can be utilized to its fullest, and will be looking ahead by even months sometimes. This is why it's so frustrating when the freedom to decide your day-to-day actions is stripped away from you. You're given no choice in the matter. 4 days will pass on that calendar and you can't raise any social stats or relationships because you're supposedly too worried about Morgana.
I don't even know why I was dealing with this crap. This is why I asked for a dog, Mom.
I know it'll be memed on eternally where you have Morgana telling you every night to sleep and not letting you leave your room, but at least that's a predictable and consistent limitation. One that, mind you, you can get around if you invest time in the right people. This both mechanically and tonally emulates the experience of a busy high schooler, along with their daily trials and tribulations. Or at least as much as a Persona game can manage. I know that, at the end of the day, what I'm pointing at is just a small and inconvenient detail in gameplay, but it only manages to worsen your experience with little justification, and that's the last thing you want to throw at your player if you can avoid it. But that's only the real-world gameplay. This video claims it's about the palace, so what's wrong with the palace itself? What warrants its title as the worst in the game? Oh. Yeah, that'll do it. I think the best way to describe this palace is that it holds an overwhelming aura of tedium and monotony. It's a pattern of repeating the same menial tasks with little inspired variation that culminates in a never-ending trot through robo-hell. The first major thing to point out is enemy variation because there isn't any. Everything is just a robot. You'll start to notice quickly that unique enemy design is scarce. Of course there are some standout and classic designs floating around, but it's all layered under a veil of robots. You've got red robot, blue robot, tall blue robot. Even then, some of the Persona designs still kinda suck. And yes, I'm aware that Megami Tensei designs aren't exactly the pinnacle of consistent quality, but come on. A star with an eye in the center, another slime but this time it's black, another star, but this time it has a face in the center. And let's go back to those robots because, yeesh, they're an immediate bummer. These things fill up about half the palace, and their shining achievement is that they're resistant to most everything that isn't their 1 or 2 required weaknesses. A bit of a hassle to deal with, and that kinda takes a hit to my SP, but at least it'll be worth it when I capture them as my own persona. I can't do it. Literally, you straight up can't use them. Then why do they take up so much of the palace? Alright, listen, I get that they only appear in very specific fights that are enlisted as somewhat scripted events, so you wouldn't be able to simply end a battle by capturing a persona. However, it gets beyond irritating once you rationalize how frequent they are for simple mini-boss enemies. The robots are the enemies, the robots are the bosses, the robots are the boss. But all of them require the exact same pattern of, I'm resistant to everything, so just keep swapping party members so you can rush through us punching bags. And I know that P5 is a game that already has you in the mindset of, get the weakness, all out attack, win. But there's a level of tedium with having to work against these damage sponges, which I'll get to in a second. Even then, the actual shadows you can recruit are often a slog to deal with as well, considering all of them just seem to have weaknesses that only require rearranging your party to ignore what the robots desire. Oh, and half of them are also resistant to physical. You know, the thing you rely on for simple damage so you can conserve SP for more important battles? Doesn't work. Well, one is actually weak to physical, and that is funny, but it doesn't undo the sins of its allies. Also, as I briefly mentioned, each set of robots is resistant to nearly everything. Collectively, however, they're all resistant to both physical and gun, meaning your SP is draining even faster across your entire party. This is an issue. It's almost like a guaranteed effort to refuse a single-day run through the palace. Yes, you can manage it with enough strategizing and maybe a stash of some replenishing items, but it's not exactly the most fair of struggles. However, this isn't the only thing preventing the preservation of calendar time. After all, if you're in a palace and you don't want to fight in order to save time or to simply conserve resources, you can always just run around the enemies with some stealth and precision. All you need to do is understand how to maneuver the map and you should be fine, right? Hey you. Yeah, you. Kid watching this video. And I don't care if you're older than me. I'm still gonna call you kid. Listen. Do you like thin hallways and unavoidable enemy patterns? Because if so, prepare to be enthralled! For those less acquainted with the basics of gameplay within these palaces, let me give you a rundown of the 4 core mechanics. There's the combat, puzzles and exploration, and finally the oft-ignored security system. Why is it ignored though? Because it's rarely an issue for someone playing smart. It adds an element of extra strategy that honestly increases your consideration for how to handle certain fights and maneuvers, and I feel it's a bit underappreciated when people discuss the design of these dungeons. I mean, look at Kanashiro's palace. While you can rush along haphazardly and try to skip past most areas, there's the implementation of security cameras that you need to worry about, incentivizing a stealthier approach for those worried about security. This opens up plenty of potential angles to tackle the palace. Maybe you want to avoid raising the level of suspicion and choose to take your time with things. Or alternatively, you can choose to take a hit via the security while betting on the chance to lower your security level through ambush attacks. It's a subtle risk-reward system that can save you real-world time. This aspect of granting players the choice of how to tackle a palace, though rarely contemplated on explicitly, adds so much to the flow of gameplay and the enjoyment of the player. However, there's a difference between a dungeon's layout adding challenges to your exploration, and a dungeon's layout being flat-out unfair. See, let's compare that example of Kanashiro's palace to something from Okumura's domain. As I stated, Kanashiro always gives the option of how to approach the hazards in your way. If you're low on SP, you can often find ways around obstacles with the hopes of speeding ahead to your next safe room. Alternatively, here's my legitimate reaction to replaying Okumura's palace when I was writing the script for this video, and being faced with one of the first enemies you're ever shown as an obstacle. Are you guys seeing this crap? There's no way. There's no way around. In fact, its path used to go further back, like back here. But now it's just here. I have to fight it. I'm not given the choice. Either I fight it or my security goes up. Shouldn't this should kind of be optional. No? Okay. Enemy placement in this palace is ruthlessly dreadful. While many times you are given an opportunity to avoid enemies that are tricky yet manageable, there are nearly as many scenarios where you're given no choice in the matter of combat. Avoiding fights in this palace is less so strategic than it is meticulous and headache-inducing. So you're left here either forcing yourself into a combat scenario or taking a hit to your security level, and even then, some of the halls are so thin that an attempt to skip past said enemies can just as likely result in them ambushing you and only setting your party back further. And even when you manage to avoid getting attacked, your security level shoots up, and unless you knew to prepare by making some items to lower that percentage, the only way to bring it back down is to fight an enemy. Either that or let the number reach 100, which will automatically boot you from the palace for that day, so either you take that penalty or you revert back to your last save. This dynamic is no longer a risk versus reward system, but rather a choice between the lesser of two evils. Either way you slice it, this palace is slowly whittling down at both your resources and your sanity. Now, not everyone is going to have as big of an issue with this aspect of the palace. Different players will be prepared with various items and personas that lessen the impact of these flaws, but hear me out when I say that just because a problem didn't affect you, that doesn't mean it's not a problem. Just because you can work around poor design doesn't mean it's not poor design. This permeates throughout the entire palace, and this is only stacked atop the factors of each battle themselves being attacks on you, while also being implemented into every single puzzle. I kid you not, every puzzle in this palace just has enemies flooding the halls when you're trying to work on them. Take, for instance, the first puzzle, where you literally just have to fight a bunch of robot bosses to find out which one likes chocolate. Oh, or how about the lunchtime puzzle, where you're put on a 30-second timer where you have to run across some conveyor belts and platforms. You're literally on the clock with your movement, yet there are enemies right in your path that you just have to run past or else you'll run out of time. And guess what? That's another hit to your security level. And if they hit you, not only do you have to do that part of the puzzle again, but you also get your security level boosted and have to waste SP to fight these guys. Isn't that wonderful? I'm definitely not seething on the inside. You're left in this palace for about 3 to 5 hours or something, probably more, and these issues are present throughout. You have to hope to whatever god might exist out there that at least the boss battles might be interesting and lift that burden off your chest. So, let's look at some bosses, shall we? So first you fight a giant robot with some robot minions. Okay, sure. Then, after a puzzle where you fight some giant robots with robot minions, you go on to fight an army of giant robots with robot minions. After that, once you send the calling card, you get to fight the palace boss, which is a giant robot with giant robot minions that have their own robot minions. Well, that settles it. God ain't real. I'm legitimately curious as to which member of Atlus thought this was a good idea. Seriously, who was the guy in the team with the automaton fetish? I have a few choice words I'd like to share with them. Words like, I don't know, something mildly insulting yet still considerate of their feelings and generally respectful in order to counteract the negativity prevalent in our current society, yet still forwarding the goal of bettering the game industry? I think I'm bad at yelling at people. Quick tangent here. Do you love doors that take a 15-second cutscene to open? Would you like several? Then today is your lucky day because I have the perfect nitpick for you. This isn't a big point at all, it's just annoying. Going back to the palace's final boss, let's analyze the ingenious design here. So first, you fight 4 of a certain type of robot, then 4 more of another type of robot, and then another 4... Okay, you get my point. You literally refight every robot you've already fought 100 times over. The one exception is that at the end, you fight an even bigger robot, and this one has the gimmick of being a damage sponge who has a single move that will instantly kill anyone who doesn't block on a specific turn. This design philosophy is brilliant, as it adds the gameplay dynamic of having to wait an extra turn before you can do anything, and essentially just drains the SP of your healer until you can start wailing on the foe again. So, when do I get to fight Okumura? I'm supposed to fight the palace owner when I'm in their palace after all, so when does he appear? Oh, he's just in a chair. No crazy transformation. He just kind of throws 30 robots at you and then you get to beat him up. I guess slapping the dude in the face is cathartic in a way, but... Are you serious? Are you serious? Are you serious, Atlus? Are you telling me that we drag our way through this massive maze of repetitive nonsense and the developers didn't even think to give a satisfying payoff for the gameplay? It's not like I didn't expect it by now, but that doesn't lessen my disappointment. We fought droves upon droves of robots for who knows how long, and they can't even let up on that for the final boss? Nope, that's it. We're moving on from the gameplay discussion. Play the next slide. Put up the one for the aesthetics. Do it, just play the friggin' slide! Okay, so when discussing story, that's only an added bonus to most games, let's be fair. Even some of the best games have moments of lackluster or non-existent storytelling. And with gameplay... okay, not every part of a game can be fun. You need the bad and janky in order to better appreciate the best that a game can offer. At the very, very least, it must at least be pleasant to look at and listen to. That's why people like the second Incredibles movie, right? That's the last hope for this palace. Just give us something aesthetically pleasing, and in the spirit as a whole, at least something a bit meaningful and symbolic. Come on, Atlus, don't let me down here. Do you guys hear that? Oh no, not like this! Not like this! This song is... meh. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. If this were in another game, it'd have a good chance of being one of the better tracks on that soundtrack. However, compare this palace theme to every other theme, and the rumbling repetition could grant you a headache with ease. Oh, and the alternate version gets even more nauseating with overbearing ambient tones and the same deadly sequence of notes on an endless loop. It's not like I have an issue with techno music, don't get me wrong, but it's such an unbearable beat with heavy tones that are cool on a first listen, okay on a third listen, and fatal on a 40th listen. What? No, I didn't need my ears anyways. Just keep on keeping on. You cretin. Ah! I didn't mean it! Leave me be! So far we've got frustrating music overlaid over frustrating gameplay and a frustrating story. Fine, sure, I'll take another hit. And you're probably guessing that the visual presentation is awful, right? It's probably my favorite part of this palace if I'm being perfectly honest. At times it genuinely does look pretty cool, especially when you first enter as it feels so different from every location before it. The blue and green lights tinted over the white halls and dark of space has an appealing aesthetic that isn't as aggravating as one would expect, and the lighting very occasionally shifts to an orange hue which adds some much appreciated flavor to the sights. Too bad it gets boring when you're staring at it all for who knows how many hours. This is more so subjective, but the whole techie future look to the palace just began to overstay its welcome before I even reached the halfway point. This set already doesn't fit the theme of heist locations that every other dungeon sticks to, and therefore has some of the least interesting environments to traverse. Like, it's cool when you first notice that you're hiding behind holograms and have all these computers strewn about, but that can only compare so faintly to the prospect of some thieves storming a castle spire to hunt down a pedophile. The look of the palace isn't bad, don't get me wrong, it's just worse. Shifting down a different lane, let me be frank with you guys. I'm an aspiring writer, and that means that, when I can, I try to focus on deeper metaphor and symbolism to a reasonable degree. Persona 5 has, up to this point, implemented this wonderfully. Each palace is literally the world manifested from one's mind, so there's ample opportunity for endless symbolism, and they've rolled with it. Up until now. I've already mentioned the symbolic mess that is the palace's distortion, since I still believe it being a factory makes infinitely more sense, but that's not the only thing the palace butchers here. To give an analogy, just because the full puzzle is poorly crafted, it doesn't mean that every piece is misshapen, but there are definitely some warped pieces lounging around these parts. Speaking of puzzles, it's time to talk about puzzles, which serve as a perfect example to my point. Each palace has a small handful of these, and while they vary in actual difficulty and fun, they each have a level of deeper meaning that helps characterize the palace owners. Of course, the strength of these symbolic instances can also vary. We have a mismatched image of shifting tiles showing the confused mindset of a girl believing she's the cause of her mother's death. We have counterfeit art pieces attempting to mimic the original product, the thieves only able to pass if they're attentive enough to spot the true painting which fuels the owner's jealousy. We have a mob boss using the password rich. Clearly, we've got a healthy dose of consistency in this game. Then there's Okumura's palace. Maybe, just maybe, the puzzles will be thematically and symbolically appropriate. First things first, we have what I like to call the big sausage pizza puzzle.
I'm not at the beach, this is a bathtub.
Or I guess, more appropriately, the big chocolate bar puzzle. It boils down to you overhearing rumors about one of the mini-bosses having a keycard, and using that info to knock on the door of each mini-boss and pretend to be a delivering man or anything that isn't a thief, so you can find out if they're the one holding the item needed for progression. The first of these is especially memorable because you're literally just going off the concept of the robot having a chocolate kink. So, what does this tell us about Kunikazu Okumura? That he, has a hierarchy in his business? Sure, whatever. That's applicable to every corporation, but one puzzle being symbolically null isn't a big deal. The next puzzle involves giant mechanical factory arms being overworked and breaking down. This is one of the more appropriate puzzles in a more subtle way, I guess, though it hardly characterizes Okumura, but rather those he's subjecting to his wrath. That's all fine and dandy, but again, why isn't the palace distortion a factory? And a quick little update from me, I went back to this clip and they quite explicitly refer to how the area is just one big factory. So tell me, why is this a space station? This doesn't make any reasonable sense. Moving ahead to the following puzzle, this one involves scheduling the shadows to go on their lunch break, where they're only permitted 30 seconds to take a breather. Ignoring how irritating the gameplay of this puzzle is, it's essentially the exact same thing as the last one, just employees being overworked, and for the third time in a row, this is a puzzle more telling of a business or factory, not a space station. Even still, nothing new is conveyed about the character of Okumura that we don't already know, nor are the aspects we do know expounded upon in any meaningful way. Also, I do find it somewhat funny how most palaces order their puzzles so they increase in symbolic intensity as you progress further. So you'd expect this lunchtime puzzle to be placed before the one word implies that its employees are being worked to death, but I guess their lack of proper free time takes priority? This is definitely nitpicky, I have to be clear with that, but this natural progression always gets a morbid chuckle out of me. Then we get to a maze of space chutes launching us around to give us an excuse for the space setting. Okay? It's pretty cool to look at, but sorry, I think I'm a bit broken here. What does this have to do with the mindset of Kunakazu Okumura? Seriously, if you have a clue as to what this could possibly mean in a symbolic sense, I implore you to spam me about it in the comments. I'd love to hear your ideas, but I've been trying to look at this from every angle, and I think I just need to settle for this just being a dumb puzzle utilizing the space concept. And that's fine! A puzzle like this is okay to have, I swear it, but not a single puzzle has a real aspect of characterization woven into it. Not one. After this, you head off to fight the boss, and things finally wrap up. The boss, to be fair, does have some symbolic aspects to it, as Okumura refuses to fight for himself and just sends all his minions to do his dirty work. Even still, this feels like a slight cop-out as he doesn't even give us a mild transformation. Like, imagine if he turned into an enormous looming puppet master as he dropped down his robots, or if we decide we want to experiment with the hypothetical factory theme, give him wires that stretch out and are implied to be controlling the robots. Even if we kept the palace theme as a space station, they've already given him bluish alien skin, so double down on his astral nature, turning him into a more grotesque figure and giving him tendrils that stretch out into his minions and leech off of them. You could even have it where, with any of these examples, he's present in the fight and saps health and energy from the enemies, making him stronger and having more defense as time goes on. Wouldn't that be a challenging and interesting battle concept? Wouldn't that have been a satisfying payoff? I'm telling you, they've easily set up this sort of abusive puppet master dynamic and concept. They just didn't utilize it to its fullest potential. This could even serve as foreshadowing to the roles of the team's traitor as well as the crimes of Masayo Shishido, who are both gradually manipulating the Phantom Thieves as well as the entirety of Japan for their own personal gains. This could have been so much more, but instead we were given the most boring boss fight this game could possibly offer us. Listen, I'm not an idiot, or at least not a major idiot. I know that this is intended to be a faux palace that the thieves rush into that has a lot of vagueness surrounding it. That's part of my whole concept regarding puppet masters and manipulation after all. This aspect of the palace is clear from the get-go if you're attentive enough. However, that doesn't excuse the palace to be bad. You can have a palace feel rushed into and eerie in scope without sacrificing the player's entertainment, especially since that sacrifice is hardly a necessary evil. At the end of the day, story shouldn't be an excuse for such a large portion of the game to be unfair and frustrating. Even then, and this might feel frustrating to hear after hearing me ramble for like 50 minutes, but I don't think this palace is actually that bad. Oh my gosh, okay. Let me explain first, okay? This game has such a strong foundation. Of course it isn't awful. It's still Persona 5. I love how this game plays. Its characters and combat keep you consistently coming back for more. The style is off the charts and I can't help but adore nearly everything this game offers. At the end of the day, the worst this game offers is still comparable to some of the more solid moments of your average AAA game. The point of this video isn't just to express how comparably terrible the Okumura Palace is, as counterintuitive as that sounds. Instead, it's meant to put in perspective what this game could have been if it only gave minimal care to what it offered. This is the difference between what I'd consider a pretty good game and what I'd consider art. Okumura's Palace? A solid JRPG dungeon. The rest of the game? Museum material, at least for the most part. I've always sided with the idea that if you truly love something enough, you should be willing to criticize it. Even then, you should be able to do that while accepting that, while those aspects you criticize may be a clear dip in quality, they don't inherently represent the whole product. Is this palace the worst part of the game? Most definitely. I mean, what else would you... Okay. There's hardly an argument against that when you lay things out. But regardless, I love Persona 5. If you haven't played this game yet, first of all, I'm gonna strangle you for spoiling yourself with this video, especially since a good portion of this makes no sense without context. But regardless, give it a shot. You'll understand why so many people, including me, are so passionate about it. And for the majority of you who have played through the game, I'm glad we got to share this experience. We truly don't deserve a game like this, in my opinion at least. Ha! Who gives a crap about my opinion though? It's not like you just watched 50 minutes of it! If I could leave you off with a final message, I'd say to appreciate good storytelling when you see it. Appreciate great gameplay. Appreciate the meaning-filled aspects of games that are placed with careful attention and artistic values. Heaven knows that Persona 5 has these elements in spades. It's a beautiful game that'll keep most who play it enthralled throughout its 100 or so hours of gameplay. Yet still, I love it enough not only to praise its best qualities, but also to point out when it's fallen on its face. And it was definitely eating dirt here. So, how do I end this video? I cried when Joker got announced for Smash. K, bye! And that's my video done. Thank you so much for fully sitting through my mad ramblings for nearly an hour, whether you're a random passerby, an avid Persona fan, or one of my friends whom I forced to watch this at gunpoint. It honestly means more to me than you could fathom. This video is like 6 months of on and off editing, though the quality undoubtedly looks closer to a week of editing for most people. And spanning back even further, I've had the seeds of this essay in my mind for well over a year. But hey, P5 is too beautiful of a game to simply disregard discussing it. Still, endless hours of school, procrastination, and life stresses had gotten me busy, but I'm elated that I finally managed to finish this project of mine. I can't even speak anymore. It just feels so great to finally let all this out. More videos to come and whatnot. When? I don't know, we'll see what happens. Subscribe if you want, but more so I hope to see you comment your own thoughts on the Palace and the game as a whole. Oh, and Persona 5 The Road just got revealed a few months back, so what do you think about that? Do you think they'll spice up the Okumura Palace to make it all schmancy and more optimized? I know I sure hope that's the case, as you can probably tell. In other news, I may end up making a sort of addendum type video following this one if I get enough comments critiquing my points in this video, to see what your guys' perspective is regarding this. Genuinely, I'd love to hear what you guys think. What I got wrong, how crappy my audio and art is, anything and everything goes. Really, I don't care what you say to me. Just call me an idiot, it's fine. Finally, I'd like to thank some friends who helped and supported me in making this project, whether it be my Discord peeps, particularly Meloichi, Sudsy, and Cans for helping me revise the script, suggesting certain jokes and talking points, as well as the other background pals I had rooting me on and giving me the drive I needed. I seriously couldn't have done this without you guys. I don't even think you understand how much I mean that. Oh, and a heapful of thanks goes out to the fansite Discord as well, which has always been a great resource for Persona discussion and has helped me meet so many great people. So I'll be linking that down below along with any other resources. And finally, here are some shoutouts to social media I'm putting on screen for various people who simply deserve to be mentioned here, and or followed if you like this sort of stuff. You guys get a flurry of gratitude, whether you like it or not. That should be it for now, but of course, I wish you all a good day. Stay safe, don't do drugs, eat your veggies. It's important. Also, what was up with that SIU director side plot? Wasn't that stupid?